Okay.
All right, I will call to order the April 23rd meeting of the Mall Mill Planning Commission. Mr. Grummer, do we have any announcements?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, if you'll bear with me one moment. No, sir, no announcements, Mr. Chair.
All right, we'll move on to the minutes from our last meeting. The agenda says February, but I believe that should be yes, it would be the February meeting. You've all been provided the minutes. Does anybody have any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Those
Yes,
opposed, no.
Hold
All
on,
right.
Mr. Chair. Mr.
Yes.
Chair, we had a few folks muted. We should go and make sure everybody's unmuted and then go back through that vote process.
Paul, can you unmute yourself?
Fisher, yes.
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yes,
All right, yes. Okay, looks like all voting vote yes. The minutes are approved. We'll move on. Mr. Grummer, I understand we have a public comment on a non-agenda item. Is that still the case?
We do not have a public comment on a non-agenda item. No, sir.
Okay, well, with no such comments, I will open the public hearing. Having no old business, we will move on to new business. The final plat of the Holstead Commercial Edition has deferred, so we'll move on to item number 2, the revised site plan for Cypress Cold Storage. Mr. Grummer.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we do have public comment on agenda items, and of course, we'll get to those. We've received one to speak tonight on behalf of agenda item 5 through 6, but right now we'll cover agenda item 1 through 2 through 4, the Cypress Cold Storage. So if you'll bear with me one moment, let me get this screen share on. Alrighty. And can you see my screen?
yes,
Yes.
Yes.
So we have Cypress Cold Storage in the industrial park. This was an application that was submitted by White Daters and Associates. Mr. Brian Dell will be present to speak on behalf of the applicant. And I believe I see it. I do see Mr. Dell in the attendee list. This is a facility that is located at 11,100 Lewis Nelson Drive. It's on 9.95 acres, zoned I-1. The applicant is requesting expansion of the site, which back in 2003, when it initially went through the site plan review process, part of that site plan anticipated an expansion into the future. So this expansion is you can see on here the previous, which was previously known as Frosty Air, has changed and now Cypress Cold Storage. The current building site is 73,650 feet, and they are expecting an expansion of 88,337 feet. Let's see. The main comments from that came out of the subcommittee meeting, which were addressed over the last week. Get to those here. And on the actual site, there was a request for emergency access to the north of the building. And that's been provided all the way on the site. So they've accommodated that request. And
Do we have a detail of what that road looks like?
we do not have a detail. Of course, this is an all-weather emergency access road, so it does not meet the standards of a street detail. It's more to meet the weight requirements of emergency access vehicles.
It could be similar to the detail that was added to the M subdivision.
Are you requesting that detail to be placed on the site plan?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. We can request that detail be added. So the expansion includes additional parking and then landscaping in front of that. The okay. Out of the punch list, they did a good job as far as meeting the requirements of the ordinance when it comes to the site. The staff comments on the site plan are specific to complying with drainage requirements from the city engineer, which attached is the engineering comments. General layout, there was none. Streets not applicable. Detention, which they do provide for underground detention on the south side of the existing building, and the detention volume provided is in conformance, as they mentioned. And then internal drainage has not been reviewed as of this moment, so they'll still need to meet the requirements of the engineering review. And then as far as the fire department comments, they have reviewing the revised plan, the emergency access road, they support the site as well. So that is the extent of this site plan. And there. Are there any questions concerning those comments?
Any questions,
Yeah,
staff?
I've got a question. This is Fisher.
Go ahead, Fisher.
Number 27 talks about hazardous restrictions and performance standards. I know that we talked about this in detail back in 2003 because of the ammonia on there. And I know we've got the letter from Baker Refrigeration outlining a lot of the standards and things of this nature. I guess my question would be is there an emergency plan in place for this site in case something does go wrong? And if so, is that on file with the fire and police?
So I have a letter which I'd actually plan on putting with agenda item number, I believe it's number 4, concerning the building plan review, because that's part of the refrigerant, which is part of the building, and not necessarily the site. But we did reach out to the contractor of the refrigerant company, and they provided a letter. And concerning your emergency response, they actually have that. And we do have a representative from the refrigerant company that is on the webinar. But they do have those in place, and the protocols that they follow meet all EPA and OSHA requirements when it comes to that system.
Well, I understand that, but again, the question is, if there is a leak,
Yes, sir.
is there an emergency procedure set up that police and fire are on schedule to address that? since we've got the schools right there?
Yes, sir. Well, so I can, we can bring the fire marshal in if you need to speak to him specifically when it comes to the fire response and the police response.
And Mr. Gerber, if you may want to bring Brian Dale onto the line. If my recollection from subcommittee was correct, is that the refrigeration system itself was originally built to handle this expansion and is not being altered. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And let me go ahead and get Mr. Dell on just to help answer any specific questions. Bear with me one moment. All righty, Mr. Dell.
I show that Mr. Dale is still muted.
Thank you.
Brian, can you hear us?
Yes, sir, I can. Thank you.
All right. Name and address for the record, please.
Brian Dale with White Daters and Associates, 24 Rawlings Circle, Little Rock, 72223.
Thanks, Brian. First question, and then I'll hand it over to Mr. Fisher for a follow-up on that. Is the refrigeration system being expanded at all, or is it the same as it was years ago?
So the compressor and all the components in the tanks are staying the same size. What they are doing is they are just expanding the refrigerant lines over to the expansion. But my understanding is all of the components that are on the roof were designed for this expansion and are the proper size and everything to handle the expansion.
Okay, and I believe Mr. Fisher may have a follow-up question to that. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see all of that, and I understand what was in the letter from Baker. I've got no problem with that. My question still is, does the company have an emergency procedure in place in case there is an ammonia leak? I just want to know whether or not, we do have some procedure in place only because of the schools being near.
So when we had, we talked specifically with the owner on the call along with the refrigerant company, and one of the questions that came up was a specific, what I did talk about what plans they had, and they do have specific plans that have to meet certain guidelines, and they're in the process of getting those updated along with the updates to the system. So the owner and the manager of the facility there did specifically say that they do have protocols in place for emergencies when it comes to response with the fire department and the police department. They've indicated everything that they have all that taken care of.
Okay, good. Because it's only been 17 years since we looked at it the last time.
Right. Well, one of the things that was commented on that was brought up, included in the letter, was the fact that even though because it's been 17 years, this is actually something that with the systems all being updated and being brought up to modern control systems, the system's going to be safer now than it has been. So it's almost an overhaul of the safety systems on it, based on how I interpret it.
That's all well and good, but accidents do happen.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any other questions of staff or the applicant, or any further comments?
This
So-
stays with the commission, right?
This stays with the commission, and we will need to go through, it'll be one action by the commission on the overall site plan. So we need to review the landscape plan and the building plan on the agenda items then, and then the staff recommendation will be after that.
Okay, so on the revised site plan, I'll make a motion, we accept it for Cypress Cove storage.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right. I'm just going to go ahead and do a roll call vote just to make sure we don't have any confusion since I cannot see Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Todd,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramsey,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
I also vote yes. All right, motion carries. The plan is approved. Moving on to item number 3, the revised landscape
Okay.
plan. Mr. Grummer.
Yes, sir. So the landscape plan meets all the requirements of the ordinance. One of the requests that came out of the question from the subcommittee was concerning the landscape. Is it supposed to be sprinkled? Yes, the landscape is supposed to be sprinkled, and the applicant has requested that the irrigation plan be provided as part of the building permit review process. And so that's one thing that they've requested, as well as staff comments on number 16, the existing proposed lighting, parking lot access aisles and drive, the curb detail. They did not show any curb on the new sidewalk as it pertains to the area being constructed around the new addition. They do have railroad ties that actually line the parking lot of this area. So as part of the requirement was to line that with an appropriate lining per the ordinance. Otherwise,
Correct.
staff recommends approval contingent upon satisfaction of staff and commissioner comments.
Do you have any questions of staff or comments? Any questions of the applicant?
Chairman.
None, sir. I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Chairman?
go.
Mr. Todd, were you making a motion? You broke up there a little bit on me.
Trying to.
Okay.
I'd like to make a I'd like to approve the revised landscape plan for Cypress Cove storage on condition of the landscaping meeting city standards when it's filed, and then the curbs meeting city standards, and then all other staff recommendations being in compliance with.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a
Second.
motion. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Do a voice vote. Just indicate yes or no. Commissioner Todd,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramsey,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
I also vote yes. Motion carries. The landscape plan is approved. Moving on to item number 4, the revised commercial building design. Mr. Grummer.
All righty. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Yes.
every time you do that, I lose you.
You lose me?
Yeah, my screen goes blank. I got to pull it back up again. Now I can see it now.
Okay. So this is the building design. The building design meets, it is comparable with the existing design. And this was part of where I had my notes concerning the refrigeration. But let's see. The actual, and I kind of on the punch list actually was, I realized was on the site plan punch list. So it does meet all bulk and area regulations when it comes to the building height limit, the lot coverage, the space in between the buildings, and the off-street parking. Everything is in compliance. So again, the main comments were concerning the drainage on the site plan, but as to the building design, the staff has no further comments. So staff recommendation is recommends approval contingent upon the city engineer approval of drainage plans and any further staff comments. And Commissioner.
Yeah, can they put a detail on there of what the exterior facade is?
So, Brian, are you still with us?
Yes, yes, sir.
All right, can you address anything concerning the exterior facade?
It is metal panels, just like what's out there today. They're matching the same type of panels and just bringing it across, just like what's out there today.
Can you add
Those are just
detail
our-
to the plan?
I'm sorry, those are just our panels, metal building our panel?
Yes.
Yeah, all you'd have to do is add a note that that's what they are.
We can have that added.
Any other questions of staff or the applicant, or any comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Okay, I guess it's my turn again. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, now, this is not a due pass. This stays with the city council, I
Correct.
believe.
Correct.
The commercial building design for Cypress Cove. I'm sorry, I've lost my voice. Recommend that we pass this.
Do I have a second?
The motion.
I have a
Second the
motion.
motion.
I have a motion in multiple seconds. Any discussion on the motion? All right, we will hold a vote. Commissioner Todd,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramsey,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
I also vote yes. Motion passes. The commercial building design is approved. Mr. Dale, we appreciate your time.
Thank you very
All right.
much, commissioners. Have a good evening.
You too.
You
All
too.
right, All right, we'll move on to item number 5, the CAW request for the amendment to the Mall Mill Master Land Use Plan from open space to special use residential. Mr. Grummer.
All righty. I guess before I get started, we've had several public comments on this one that has come in as of the point when we began. Before we got into the meeting, we had approximately 150 emails that came in from residents and members of the country club. Due to the vast number of those, we had one that was common to all of them. So I've forwarded that information to the commissioners, and that will become part of the public record. So we're not going to go into detail of reading those right now. We do have someone from Maumelle Country Club who will speak on behalf of the majority of the residents that have called in or emailed in, that is. And I'll summarize some of the comments once, bear with me here. Once I get through my presentation on the description. So,
Quick question on the comments. You said there were 150. Were there any in favor?
I did not see any that came in favor. All of them were in opposition.
All right, carry on. Thank you.
And I guess, and remind me whenever I get done, we'll need to bring the representative. We have Mark Bingman, who is representing the applicant along with Holloway Engineering. All righty. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So this application came in from Holloway Engineering on behalf of Central Arkansas Water. This is a request to amend the land use from open space of a specific parcel to special use residential, and amend the zoning from open space to planned residential district. They proposed in their application of higher end multifamily development with less than 30 units. Of course, this is a rezoning application and not a development request. So we have a zoning and land use analysis. I won't go through and read it verbatim. That was part of your packets, but I'll summarize some of the items on here. One of those is from an environmental impact. There are certainly things that we look at from an environmental standpoint. Previously, this was on the agenda back in 2018 for the Planning Commission and was pulled because of concerns over the existing holding pond and the facilities and environmental issues. So since that was pulled, and since then they've been demolished, and there's been a phase 1 environmental done on the site, and the applicant has indicated that there is no contamination on the site. But other environmental impacts, which also include, are the social and the surrounding area and the impacts there. The neighborhood position, we reached out with Maumelle Country Club along with the applicant a couple of weeks ago, and met at the site, and there were concerns with the access to the property, which will come up in detail here momentarily. And then quality controls, the fire department, as far as we've got fire code compliance with fire marshal and street improvements that would need to be met. Traffic and street right-of-way, previous use of the water treatment plant was a light commercial, and there's an existing access easement accessing the property that's 50 feet wide. The road size varies from 18 feet to 24 feet. But the amount of increase of the project could impact that volume of traffic, which would be determined by the ordinance as far as development, what can be put there and what can't. An analysis of the summary, the applicant is requesting, again, the change of the land use and the zoning. We've The applicant has indicated that the current zoning is affecting their ability to sell the property. Furthermore, the applicant's buyer has stated they are limited in the amount of investment they wish to invest on the designs without support for a land use and zoning change to the property. The Maumelle Country Club, their concerns are the increase in density and usage on the land and the impacts to their business and operations would be impacted by this. So I have seen some opposition to any residential, but the majority has been more in wanting to have a say in the access and how that road is to be improved. So I'll let others speak to that as far as the applicant and the public comment. As far as the location, it is located behind the Maumelle Country Club clubhouse. It's centered around multifamily units, scattered site around the area, and then the land use in the area is a combination. It's completely surrounded by open space with multifamily attached, scattered site around, and then special use residential, single family and some special use residential to the north. And the site in more detail. We've received communication from Central Arkansas Water pertaining to the access easement, which was forwarded to everyone in the packet. And so with that, I'll just open it up for discussion. Would you like me to bring in any representative or how do you want to do that, Chair?
I believe we have a public comment first, do we not?
Yes, sir, we do. So,
And Mr. Grummer, if you would not mind keeping time on the comment.
okay. You'll bear with me. Let me bring Mr. Gib Carpenter in to speak. All righty. Mr. Carpenter, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Before the clock starts here, Mr. Director, I mentioned to you that I have screen share to do, and that's pretty important to my comments. Are we going to be able to accommodate that?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't have any controls to allow that here, so.
Bear with me. Quite a few people on the call. Let me get to the right place. Okay. All right, Mr. Carpenter. I promoted you to a panelist, so you should have access. You're muted right now. Can you hear it? Can you?
How's that?
That'll work.
And what about video?
I can see you, Mr. Carpenter.
All right. Ready?
Go ahead.
If you'll push your.
Carpenter. I live at 222 Mountain Terrace, Maumelle, Arkansas, and I am a member of Maumelle Country Club. I have been asked to speak on behalf and to help you guys not have to hear from a number of different members. I know that you received some emails just in the interest of time. And I'm going to roll through this very quickly, and maybe you have some questions on the back end.
Yep. Are you trying to share your screen right now, Mr.
I'm
Carpenter?
doing it right this minute. Here you go.
There we go.
Are you seeing it?
All right. Yes, sir. And I'll start your time now.
Okay, you're probably familiar with the Holloway survey of the water treatment plant from 2018. For my purposes, I'm going to focus on the area around the club property and our entrance and and property. You can see a dotted line on the Holloway map. I'll highlight that for you if you're not seeing it clearly. That would represent the 50-foot recorded easement that Jess Odom granted the Suburban Improvement District in 1976. And let's take another look at it. Those familiar with the property, and then there would be the access easement. Now, the position of the club, and probably one of the reasons I'm on here, is this isn't our first rodeo. We had a similar situation with the developer Bottom Line Inc. It was unfortunate and expensive for the club, turned out to be that way for the city, and I'm sure it didn't work well for Bottom Line. But our position then, and we did prevail, was that access easement had been severed and abandoned. And that would be our position here. It's never good probably to tip your legal hand. And I know this is not the forum for a legal decision, but as you can see, that access easement departs Club Manor, cuts through our parking lot, winds up in our entrance circle by the flagpole, and then proceeds around the north side. So we feel like that we will prevail, that easement has been expunged, has been abandoned. Now, we know that we can't landlock our neighbor, and we don't, and we haven't. This is the easement that would probably survive as a prescribed easement that Central Arkansas Water, prior to that Maumelle Water Management and the Suburban Improvement District, has used to access that property. And it's available for them to continue to use. Now, as the Holloway survey shows, in places it's only 18 feet 3 inches wide. So as far as an access method for a residential development, the club has serious concerns with that. In addition to that, we have high concentration areas where near our pro shop where we stage our tournaments, and that's important to our business model, is business corporate events. Also, the practice green is utilized every day, and that's where we hold our junior clinics and so forth. So in addition to that, there's substantial cart traffic. This shows you the routing that our golf carts use to get to and from the driving range, to and from the first tee, and in return.
Mr. Chair, that's 3 minutes.
I yield.
All right, Mr. Carpenter, what exactly is the decision-making structure of the country club? Is it a member vote, board of directors, or how does that work?
Well, let's see if I can end the screen share. I'll just have to answer your question with that up there because I can't figure out how to end this. Oh, there it is. The club has a governance of a board of directors that is elected by the membership. Any property decisions with regard to the sale or anything that would involve the asset of the club's property involves a vote of the entire membership. So
and what's the membership of the club in numbers?
Well, you got a number of different questions there. We have voting members, we have social members, we've got junior members.
How about voting members?
Right off the top of my head, I would say approximately 160. We have a total of about 400 member families that belong as social or some other classification.
Any other commissioners have any questions, Mr. Carpenter?
I do forgive. Has the country club looked at trying to access this from the south?
Well, the country club opinion is that it's not our responsibility to look at how to do it. Now, the director mentioned that when we met informally with the applicant's engineer,
Can everybody hear?
No,
I've lost Mr. Carpenter.
Yeah, we missed that last part, Mr. Carpenter.
I don't know which last part, but we did, when we met informally a week ago Monday, we walked to the south side. I believe Mr. Holloway, Eric Holloway is on. He made some comments about the suitability of that. Our position, and I would say that the developers and possibly the realtor asked several times, well, what do we want to do? Well, it's really not incumbent on the club to.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk.
I don't know if y'all heard that. There was some artificial intelligence trying to figure out how I talk. My wife's been trying to do that for a long time. At any rate, we feel that that is their responsibility, not our responsibility to resolve how to access that property for a residential development without adversely affecting our business. The recorded access easement that we think has been abandoned is not the way to do it. The current route in and out of there is not the way to do it. And after that, it would be up to them to approach us with something that we could take to our membership that would be palatable, I would think.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Johnson?
No, not this time. I got a question for the applicant when we get to that point.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Carpenter?
No, unless y'all have questions, that's the end of my presentation.
All right. Thank you.
All righty.
As we've indicated, we've got some questions of the applicant. Let's go ahead and bring on the applicant's representatives into the meeting.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I was trying to, what was that, Chair? Mr. Chair?
Let's bring the applicant's representatives into the meeting so they can field questions.
And before I do that as well, do you want me to provide the summary of the public comments that came in addition to Mr. Carpenter?
Sure.
So out of the comments that came in, concerns were that the operations may be disrupted at the country club, the safety to the pedestrian and the cart path, children that play at the country club, the impacts to that. There was a majority of cart traffic that happens all the time, and then there were property value, lessening of property values, increase in the automotive traffic, as well as crime and other things like that, dump truck traffic and heavy equipment traffic during construction. Whenever they were deconstructing the water treatment plant, that was a concern for those that were there. And there was also concerns for the overall viability of the operations of the country club. One thing that seemed to be a continuous factor, which also being an economic developer, understanding that the country club is it is a part of Maumelle. It has a long history with Maumelle, and it's certainly a business that has to be considered in the impacts to that, which goes towards the future, since Maumelle is, of course, one of the higher income per capita cities in the state. Having a viable country club is certainly a good thing. So we want to. So that was one of the things in comments that came out. Let me bring in the applicant's representative. I'll bring in, got Mark Bingman, and I'll bring in Eric Holloway, representing the firm that submitted the application. Mark, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm here representing both the seller and the buyer. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. Obviously, the way that property was pretty much unusable land. Maybe some would even say an eyesore. And we believe that developing this into high-end multiple units, 25, no more than 30, would be the highest and best use. As a commercial development, it can't be industrial, it can't be retail, it probably wouldn't be office. So multifamily appears to be the highest and best use for this property. As was mentioned earlier, it's been scraped clean, got a clean phase 1, no need for a phase 2 on this. Any sale proceeds of this go directly to paying off the bond that is a benefit to all citizens of Maumelle. So we do have somewhat of a proposed new road that kind of parallels right where the existing road is now. We feel like we do have, you should have in your packet a letter from the legal counsel of CAW that states the case that that is not an abandoned easement. That easement goes with whatever owner of the land is, and consequently, the easement can be improved, both by Arkansas case law and federal case law. So I think we address those concerns. And basically, you know, the new proposal, we're sensitive to golf cart safety and the golf safety. We've got access crossing this new proposed road at the 9th fairway cart path. They could also get access to the putting green. And we also have a second access crossing by the cart barn. With this new design, we would add additional parking up by the cart barn. We would add additional area that would be paved by the scoreboard that's used during tournaments, so that a lot of carts can gather there and find out if they're winners or losers in that tournament. With the safety concern in the street would obviously be curbed so that that safety and that flow of traffic of golf carts could be controlled. So consequently, we think we're addressing the safety concerns. Like Mr. Carpenter said, we did meet a week ago Monday, and we asked for their input. And he did state tonight, as well as he did last Monday, that they don't have the position that they want to give us any input for, you know, what would or wouldn't be acceptable. So as Scott mentioned earlier, the economics of this development doesn't seem fair to spend a lot of engineering for then the country club to then just say no. So we're confident that reasonable minds can in fact create an acceptable access and road for this small residential development once it's rezoned. I don't want to get too bogged down into the details of the road at this point in time. We've got an easement. We plan to improve the easement and make this either a private drive or a city street. We would prefer it to stay a private drive. So I think once everyone sees what is being proposed, reasonable minds will say, you know, this is the best alternative. This is the highest and best use for this land. So without getting too detailed about the road construction, what type of road it is, tonight we're just asking that this be rezoned to PRD. That would inevitably be the highest and best use and a complement to what is already on the 9th fairway and already on the 18th fairway. So if you've got any questions, Eric and I are here to be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Bingman. Any questions of the applicant representatives?
Mr. Chair, Mark, this is Craig. Have you shared this sketch that you were referencing to the membership or to Gip that you're he didn't mention it in his comments and you mentioned it in yours. I was wondering if you shared that with him.
That has not been shared. It's work in progress. Obviously, we didn't want to go too far down that road if we didn't have it rezoned. So with the rezoning, we can go forward with more discussions about that road improvement. But it basically falls within that 50-foot easement. 50 foot and, whatever widening or width we have to make that street, if it has to be curbed and guttered, if it needs to be to city standards, then we can deal with that down the road. And I think reasonable minds will find a compromise on how this can be accessed. This is no different than the Country Club of Arkansas that crosses city streets 5 or 6 places. This is no different than Pleasant Valley Country Club. This is no different than Chenal Country Club. It's just something that is inherent with residential in amongst a golf course development. So we don't really see this as any different. And I think that the low speed that will be going through there would certainly be less hazardous than a commercial truck that may not be able to get stopped in time that has been going on for years. Let me know what other questions or concerns you have.
So the current sketch that you're proposing is not, or currently, I guess, perhaps your engineer has looked at it enough to know that it cannot be contained within either the prescriptive easement that Mr. Carpenter was mentioning or within the existing platted easement that's shown.
No, that is not correct. It can be within that easement, but I think it's in everyone's best interest to modify it and move it a little to the left or a little to the right so that everybody has a good design here. But no, it is the city, it is Central Arkansas Water's position that easement can be used right where it is. And it has not been abandoned. And furthermore, it can be improved and enhanced. And they've got case study of Arkansas and federal that backs that up.
Guess, Eric, are you online here?
Yes, sir. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Good evening, Eric.
Good evening.
You've obviously looked at this a little bit. You're the engineer on the project. Do you think that, can make sure I ask this question, is that, I've looked at the platted easement, and then I saw, assuming that the prescriptive easement was in place that Mr. Carpenter went over, I think providing a road that meets the city standard would be very challenging. Mr. Bingman's making the position that it can be done, and I would doubt that without variance. Just looking at it from an engineering perspective, and I don't disagree with his statement either regarding it will be beneficial. I just want to make sure that our attendees that are here understand that providing, I think that it would be very challenging, if not impossible, to provide a road to city street standard, regardless if it's a private or if it's public. It's the same requirements to provide access to the property. And I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Based on the 2018 easement, the one that I've shown on the survey in 2018, I would say you're correct. But since the subcommittee meeting, I think all of you probably received an email, or I know it's in the current packet, of an easement we discovered last week. There's been several easements filed over the years, some of them to land management. This one was actually directly to the improvement district. It is a 50-foot easement. It does follow the current road completely, in a full city standard street could be built within that 50-foot easement as it is today.
So I want to make sure I'm correct on this, Eric. It says, so the easement that's platted on the site plan that was in our packet is not correctly represented?
I believe that Mark, I was out last week and I apologize. Mark did give a new map. I can see it on there, but it's not clearly delineated. If you look at it closely, he's got solid lines following the, it should have bearings and distances and all that, Craig. So I apologize for that, but you can see that 50-foot. It goes PI to PI. I would have preferred it, follow the curbs, obviously. So that presents a little bit of a challenge, but I do believe I could get local street radiuses, that are required by ordinance within those hard turns.
Okay. So I was going to ask you is that have you ran meets and bounds on this easement that's on file and represented it on this plat?
Yes, the current easement that was found, and I think everybody should have a copy of it. The one that was researched by CAW's legal counsel is that solid line that's following the drive to the facility from Club Manor.
So the hidden line should be deleted.
Yes, it's an existing easement, but it's a one to Maumelle Land Development, and is one that has been vetted before. And I might agree with Mr. Carpenter's comments about it, but there is a secondary or a previous easement from 1976, and I think we provided a copy of that that does follow the actual existing improvement.
Thank you.
So there is another easement document that's more recent than the 1976 document that we have?
It is also a 1976 document signed by Jess Odom. It was actually to the Suburban Improvement District. The one on the survey is the one to Maumelle Land Management. The one that we provided recently is the more appropriate easement and should be the one on the survey. And it has been provided. It was provided about a week and a half ago. We can certainly do it again.
Do we have any further questions of the applicant or staff? Do we have any comments?
So, and just in clarification, I had, let me pull my.
Is Maumelle Land Development, Inc. a predecessor in interest to CAW? Are both of these entities, or which one is it?
I would refer to the letter from the CAW attorney.
Yes.
That spells out the chain of how that ownership follows. I also would point out that back to the abandonment of the easement, according to Arkansas law, that would have to be an intentional relinquishment of that easement and to give up absolutely. And of course, that never happened.
Well, I'd also add the comment that our issue here tonight is the land use and the zoning. And while the ultimate feasibility of the use may be something to consider, all we would effectively be doing tonight is deciding whether or not the zoning gets changed and whether or not CAW can sell the property without a deed restriction. The developer would still have to figure out suitable access to the property before anything could be done with the property. So, we're not exactly endorsing one way or another any particular type of access by any action or inaction tonight.
And I would echo that as well. We're just here to get it rezoned, and I'm sure that reasonable minds can get together and find a suitable access, and we can submit that with the entire overall site plan development, and have your review at that time. We're just here to make it a higher and better use than what it currently is.
It would appear that tonight is just the first step in a long process.
Agreed.
So,
Madam, this is Craig, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Assuming that regarding a planned residential development and access of a private drive, assuming this moves forward, just don't want an unintentional consequence here and providing a vote to rezone, is that what position does the commission have regarding that private drive? It just has to meet, when it comes back before us, it would have to meet, as far as our purview, it would have to meet the city requirements for a private drive. So whether Maumelle, unless the adjoining property owner has issue with that, which there's 150 responses, I guess, on the table that pretty much has already said the fact. I don't know if they were taking issue. I didn't get to ask Gip if they were really taking issue with it being residential. I don't think that was the case, but it seemed like there was a lot of concern about safety. What is it within our purview at that point in time when it comes back for PRD regarding private access, if it complies with city requirements?
You're saying, what is your purview at that time regarding construction of a private street?
Well, I don't, if as long as it meets the requirements of the city, I don't know if we take the issue between the owner and the applicant, I guess at that point in time, because it's an easement, would be a private issue. I mean, does the city really have does the city have a position that we you know, whether that drive comes on the south side, north side, as long as it meets city requirements, it would be satisfactory to our requirements, correct?
Well, if it can meet city requirements, I mean, the current restriction on private streets is that they must be cul-de-sacs or short loop roads, and our cul-de-sac definition does not allow a cul-de-sac to be more than 750 feet. So that is an issue to be addressed in the future.
The other limiting
private streets.
and the other limiting factors when it comes to the access is the way the ordinance reads. A private road can only handle a density of up to 6 units per acre, which at a little over 3 acres, when you look at the measurements, that would equate to a maximum of around 21 units or so. Anytime you exceed 6 units per acre, then the ordinance defines that as having to be internal streets that actually connect to a collector. So the improvement to the private drive first would have to meet street standards. And then on top of that, you would have to make sure that it meets also the safety concerns, the fire access, the sanitation access, and but for the most part, because it's going through the country club, safety mitigation standards to make sure that it complies with the needs of both properties.
Scott, just for clarification, I believe it's slightly over 4 acres that this developer is buying. So by that standard of 6 per acre, you certainly could do the 24 and maybe more, depending on what development was done.
And the one thing to note as well, the PRD allows for densities from just a single family, one home to up to multifamily. So it does provide flexibility. The majority of the city of Maumelle is PRD, which PRD encompasses mostly single family residential. Of course, on the application process, they have requested that they're looking at more multi-unit, similar to the the scattered site residential that's around the country club.
Gentlemen, it's a complementary use to what is already there on the 9th and the 18th fairway. We'll work out the road.
Do I have any more questions or comments?
Before discussion ends, I would like to discuss the guidelines that are stated in the code, if we could, for just a few minutes.
Go ahead.
These are found in 54-79, and it is the Planning Commission is to review the proposal and base their decisions using these guidelines. Okay, so we need to make sure these are discussed and there is analysis as to each one. The first one is other changes that have occurred in the neighborhood, not just with respect to this piece of property, but in the neighborhood since the land use plan was adopted or the latest amendment was enacted. And I just looked to see, and our latest map, when we approved a new map, I believe was 2014. Okay, so it would be changes in the neighborhood, the surrounding neighborhood since 2014. The second is whether these changes resulted in a change to the neighborhood's character did this neighborhood's character change sufficiently to justify the proposed land use plan change, to change it from open space to PRD. The third is issues and concerns raised by the neighborhood when submitted with sufficient specificity to enable the commission or council to respond to those issues. And then fourth, other substantial or technical evidence that any proponent or opponent of the proposed change submits. So that would, of course, include the concerns that were raised tonight. Also, in regards to open space, the code does spell out that the restrictions on ownership are meant to preserve those open spaces. So that is a consideration to take into account as well.
Mr. Bingman or Mr. Holloway, how would you, what would you characterize as the changes to the neighborhood? I think we heard some speaking on most of the other points.
Well, I mean, I'll let Eric talk if there's something that I'm not thinking of, but the changes to the neighborhood is making it more conformed with what is already there. You've got condominiums on the 9th and the 18th fairway. We're going to have upscale units just like those. Obviously, that'll be more modern. So I would say that it is not changing at all the betterment for the entire area.
Mr. Holloway, anything to add?
I would just add that, you know, given the previous use, this is certainly more harmonious with a golf course. I certainly would believe so. That's quite a significant change to have the water plant now demoed out of that site, and it was not the most sightly of elements. And I do think it's probably worth noting that even with our development, the existing screening that was along the water plant is still in place. So, and there's quite a bit of grade that I meant to mention that earlier and I didn't, but there's quite a bit of grade between like the pool area of the country club facility and what we would be designing. So it's not as though you're going to have residential development that's looking into the back of the existing facilities. So just wanted y'all to be aware of that.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question of council. Melissa, and when you were going over the items, one of what stuck out was you said since 2014. What's been going on since then? Is that
so? The 2014 is when we last adopted a revised land use plan, the revised map.
Okay, but how would that play into the possibility of changing this from open space to SUR?
So the guideline says that since that time, since whenever we've adopted our last revised map, there has to have been a change to the neighborhood. You need to consider whether there's been a change in the neighborhood since that time that would justify this land use change.
Well, would the removal of a water treatment plant be characterized as a change in the neighborhood?
Well, it's with respect to.
That's what I'm hanging up on, because if you look at all the residential surrounding around there, no, there's not been any change since 14.
Well, I mean, the golf course itself has been there for 50 years, so that hasn't changed. And the surrounding neighborhood, I interpret that to mean the surrounding areas, not just the plat that's in question itself.
And that hasn't changed either.
The golf course or the
surrounding neighborhood, the
right.
Residential units. I mean, that's been there a long time also. So is that saying that you can't you can't rezone that?
Well, it's saying that that's one of the 4 guidelines that you have to go by. Your decision should be based on other changes that have occurred, if any have occurred in that neighborhood, since the most recent map was approved, and whether these changes resulted in a change to the neighborhood's character sufficiently to justify the land use change.
Certainly, we could all agree that additional residential units there would be an improvement from what could be there as ugly storage. They could have left the plant the way it was. Certainly, we can all agree that that is going to enhance and improve the neighborhood and increase probably property values. I mean, it's a potential for 25 to 30 new memberships to the country club.
Mr. Bingman, as a point of procedure, we do appreciate your comments, but we do ask that you be recognized before you address the commission.
Okay.
Commissioner Johnson?
I would like to address Mr. Bingman. I guess, it appears that your client or someone doesn't want to spend any more time working with 150 folks of opposition. I guess we could say whether it's the same letter or not, it's still a vote of opposition in the club. But your client can't continue development of these units until access is worked out. I don't know which is coming first, the chicken or the egg, but it appears that you've taken some liberty and effort and perhaps money, and you discussed those items tonight, and yet, which appears to be perhaps in the best interest of both parties. And I don't understand, I guess to some extent, I do think that that the country club perhaps holds more, we heard the same things from Mr. Henson as well too, and I'm not trying to put your client in that same boat. I just know that he had the best intention and it didn't work out for anybody involved. And I'm just concerned that I don't want to be headed down that same path. And although I appreciate your assurances and your client's assurances, I think Mr. Carpenter made it pretty clear regarding, their position, that I think they do want to work something out. And it looks like you're on a good path forward, but your client, if we rezone this and close on this property next month, access is still an issue. And perhaps it can be worked out. I don't know if you want to, you're still here tonight, you're still on the agenda. I don't know if you want to hit the pause button and work with your client another 30 days and see if you can get to that point. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. So I would ask it, is that even in consideration? You want us to vote on the zoning and yet we have 150. We didn't have one in support, not one.
But Craig,
Well, actually, clarification, we did have one in support early on. After we put the sign up, I got a call. It was a golfer that was driving by the sign, and he did say that he was in favor of more residential because he was looking at retiring and downsizing. So yes, there was one.
Okay, I stand corrected.
But we're voting on the zoning. The development plan will have to come before us later on.
Oh, I understand that.
There is time, and I know you understand that, but we're voting on the zoning and not the development plan itself.
So should I clarify as well the process, just to make sure that everyone that's in attending knows that this is a zoning application. If it is approved by the Planning Commission, then it would move to the City Council, and the City Council would require 3 readings. That means 3 City Council meetings for public comment. So that could be another 6 weeks, offering up 3 other opportunities for it. Then it's voted upon. If it is denied tonight by the Planning Commission, then it can be taken to the City Council. What's the term? I've got a mind blank.
Appeal.
Appeal. It can be appealed to the City Council. If the appeal is not accepted, then it'll be another 12 months before this application can be presented back to the City of Maumelle. Planning Commission. So just FYI and clarification.
I would
on
like
the
a
process.
response to my inquiry with Mr. Bingman.
Scott, I mean, to answer your question, no, we need a vote on this. We feel we have legal rights to do this development. Again, we're here for the rezoning. Reasonable minds can figure out a road. There's going to be access to that property. It can't be landlocked. So we'll find a compromise. We'll find a road that will work and meet city standards. If Scott wants to, Scott has our proposed first attempt at a proposal that he could share up there and let everybody see that, you know, it addresses the safety concerns, it addresses, you know, fire marshal concerns and everything else. So if we want to get into understanding all the details at this point about the road, Scott, you have my blessing to share that with everybody. But at this point, we're here for rezoning. To leave it the way it is just doesn't make any sense. So it's the highest and best use for that property.
Mr. Chair.
I'll defer to other commissioners if anybody else wants to see the proposed road, but we have no input or say so in whether or not that road is acceptable unless that's what's presented to us in a development plan. So I would suggest it's irrelevant to our decision right now because unless it's approved by the country club.
Mr.
Would any
Chairman,
other commissioners like to see it?
Mr. Chairman, at
Yes,
this time,
Commissioner
I'd
Fisher.
like to make a motion to recommend for amendment to the master street plan, our master land use plan from open space to special use residential. I think we beat this to death.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, we'll go to a vote. Commissioner Green,
No.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramsey,
No.
Commissioner Todd,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. By a vote of 5-2, we will issue a due pass recommendation to the City Council for this item. Moving on to item number 6, which is the same applicant, same property request for the amendment to the zoning map from open space to PRD. Mr. Grummer, is there anything else to add that we have not yet discussed?
No, sir. The same comments stand, and the staff recommends for a due pass recommendation to the Maumelle City Council.
Mr.
We have any-
Chairman, I'd like
Mr. Fisher?
to make a motion to recommend that the master land use plan be changed from open space to planned residential development district.
We're in zoning now.
Okay.
Yes, PRD. He's from
PRD.
right.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? We'll move on to a vote. Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramsey,
Yes.
Commissioner Todd,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
I also vote yes. By a vote of 7-0, we will issue a due pass recommendation to the City Council on the zoning change. That concludes our new business, and I will close the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Bingman and Mr. Holloway.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to City Council liaison reports for the meeting March 2nd. Commissioner Ramsey.
There was nothing on the agenda for relating to the planning commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramsey. March 16th, Commissioner Todd.
Yeah, we had in the new business resolution 2020-4 approving a revised preliminary plat for the M at White Oak. We also had the first reading of ordinance 996 accepting street and drainage for the same facility. First reading of 997, amending the land use plan at Diamond Point and White Oak. 998, zoning map for the same area. One thing that was a little unusual was a motion was made and passed to explore and proceed with the design of a roundabout at White Oak and Country Club Parkway.
Thank you, Commissioner Todd. Moving on to April 6th, Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, sir. Second reading for accepting of dedication of streets in IM development. Second reading on the Maumelle land use plan. This has to do with the commercial development out there by the ballparks that came through us. Same thing along with the zoning map, land use, and the zoning map was acted on in the same meeting for second reading. And that is all the Planning Commission business for that evening.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Moving on to April 20th, Commissioner Green.
All right, I will refer you to the video that is online.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Good job social distancing.
That's right, that's right.
Moving on to council liaisons for May 4th, Commissioner Smith, and May 18th, Commissioner Fisher. Do I have any further motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, yes.
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 Those opposed, no.
It's the
We're
longest,
adjourned.
it's the longest meeting we've had in about 4 years.
Well,
Longer than
Fisher,
that.
if you keep talking, I can't adjourn. We are adjourned, folks.
Bye.
Thanks.